Members, it's time for us to start the meeting, and we've also formed a quorum. This meeting is to elect the chairman for the panel for this legislative session. Well, I won't be long-winded. Any nominations? Nomination for chairman. Dr. Kwakaki, I nominate Ms. Emily Lau. Ms. Emily Lau, any seconder? There are two seconders. Ms. Emily Lau, do you accept the nomination? Any other nominations? Mr. Wong Kwok Kin. Mr. Tam Yu Chung, any seconder? Mr. Ip Kok Him and Mr. Christopher Chung, second. Mr. Tam Yu Chung accepts the nomination. So Mr. Tony Tse will chair the election. Any other nominations? No? We'll take a vote by secret ballot. I ask that 1 minute be given to each candidate for explaining their position. Those in favor? Yes, we'll follow the procedures. Members, those members who are present, those in favor and those against, any comments? We have members both in favor of and against the proposal, so we'll take a vote immediately. Well, we'll immediately start by secret ballot. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Please take down their names. Yes, please raise your hands longer. Mr. To, Mr. Charles Mock. Yes, please, your hands. Dr. Helena Wong, Dr. Kwakaki, Mr. Chan Kai-Lok, Mr. Dennis Kwok, Mr. Alan Leung, Mr. Gary Fan, Dr. Fernando Chung, Mr. Chan Chi-chun, Mr. Ip Kin Yuen, Ms. Emily Lau, Mr. Albert Ho, Ms. Claudia Mo, Mr. Frederick Fung, Mr. Kenneth Leung, Mr. Leung Yu Chong, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. James To, Mr. Wu Chi Wai. They're in favor. Those against, please raise their hands. Sorry, we're taking a vote. You can raise your hand again after the counting of votes. I'll give the floor to you. Procedural matter. What's the procedural matter? The point of order is that we are now conducting an election. We cannot stop candidates to announce their platforms because that will affect our decision on casting of votes. Well, according to the ROP, there's no such procedure, but I'll take a vote to see whether the majority of members are in support of that suggestion. We're already in the election. Those against the proposal of asking the candidates to speak, please raise their hands. Dr. Priscilla Leung, Ma Fong Kwok, Mr. Wong Kwok Hing, Mrs. Regina Ip, Mr. Michael Tan, Mr. Lam Tai Fai, Mr. Leung Sing, Mr. Yu Si Wing, Mr. Christopher Chung, Mr. Wong Kwok Kin, Mr. Christopher Chung, Mr. Lau Wong Fat, Mr. Chan Kin Po, Dr. Chung Lai Wan, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Mr. Chan Kam Lam, Ms. Tari Lee, Mr. Ip Kok Him, Ms. Chan Yun Han, Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, Ms. Alice Mack, Mr. Abraham Sheck, Mr. Tam Yu Chung, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Tony Jie, sorry, I didn't see him clearly. Mr. Martin Liao. Mr. Paul Jie. Read out the names of those members who are in favor. Rectify me if I'm wrong. Mr. Ho Leung Yu Chung, Claudia Mo, Dr. Kwok Kaki, Mr. Kenneth Leung, Mr. Charles Mok, Mr. Carrie Fan, Mr. Albert Ho, Ms. Emily Lau, Dr. Helena Wong, Mr. Wu Chi Wai, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. Chan Chi Chun. Please count. And those who raise their hand, that is against, who is against the motion, with Mr. Paul Jie, Deputy Chairman.
Okay. 得啦，寫翻㗎啦。梁家傑、郭榮鏗、陳家樂同埋馮檢基、張超雄係㗎，贊成㗎。
或者為咗減少混亂咧，麻煩秘書再可唔可以讀多
？Well, the clerk, would you please read out the names again? It doesn't matter if you go slowly. Clearly. Miss Claudia Mo, Mr. Dennis Kwok, Mr. Chan Kai-lok, Miss Sit Ho, Miss Leung Yu Chung, Fernando Chung, Alan Leung, Charles Mok, Gary Fan, Frederick Fung, Helena Wong, Emily Lau, Wu Chi Wai, Albert Ho, Shin Chung Kai, and Chan Chi Chun. James To, Ip Kin Yun. Yes, added already.
其他人遺漏咗。
Have they omitted anybody? Those against? Well, the figures are not the same. Well, after reading out the names, my name disappeared. Well, I want the clerk to do this again cautiously. 20. Those in favor, 20.
反對嘅請讀下。
反對啊，謝偉。
Those against, Mr. Paul Jie, Mr. Michael Tan, Regina Ip, Tony Jie, La Wong Fat, Christopher Chung, Chung Kwok Pan, Wong Kwok Hing, Alice Mack, Chen Yun Han, Martin Liao, Ma Fong Kwok, Stephen Ho, Chan Kam Lam, Wong Ting Kwong, Tam Yu Chung, Ip Kok Him, Abraham Sheikh, Priscilla Leung, Chan Kim Po. Any omission?
姚思榮、吳亮星。
對唔住啊，大家因為可能人數。
Sorry, there are many members. The clerk, would you please conduct this cautiously?
冇撳鐘呢個程序，冇撳鐘呢個程序，唔好意思。
對唔住，我理解咧，呢個咁嘅。
Understand that we cannot have a division for this procedure. There is no division bell.
加翻得未？我再讀多一次，讀翻一次。謝偉全你咪剔咗？係嘅。好，我再讀一次。
麻煩秘書再讀一次嚇。
Clerk again, slower please, but clearly. Those against, Michael Tan, Mrs. Regina Ip, Mr. Paul Jie, Mr. Lau Wong Fat, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Mr. Christopher Chung, Mr. Christopher Chung, Mr. Wong Kwok Kin, Ms. Chan Yun Han, Ms. Alice Mack, Mr. Wong Kwok Hing, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Ng Leung Sing, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, Mr. Martin Liao, Mr. Chan Kam Lam, Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, Ms. Star Lee, Mr. Tam Yu Chung, Mr. Ip Kwa Him, Mr. Lam Tai Fan, Mr. Chan Kim Po, Mr. Tony Jie, Mr. Abraham Sheikh, Dr. Priscilla Leung, and Mr. Yu Si Wing. Dr. Chong Lai Wan.
27位反對，
暫時嘅20個。
贊成20，反對27。
而家宣布咧係。
I declare the results 24-27 against. Since there are more members opposing the proposal, we will not allow or will not invite candidates to speak. If there are no other nominations, we will proceed to a secret ballot. Our secretariat staff will distribute a ballot paper and a chalk to each member. Well, when I ran for the deputy chairmanship of the development panel, I was allowed to state my platform. Thank you. We were present and we knew what was happening. Thank you.
亦都暫時咧，我亦都宣讀翻一。
And the standard procedures, each member will be allocated a number according to the order of nomination. So please use your chop to to indicate your choice next to the. Please chop the number of the candidate you prefer. You don't have to fold the ballot paper. And please, this is a secret ballot. Do not show your completed ballot paper to another member.
有冇委員係上
？Is there any member who hasn't received a ballot paper? Hands up, please.
OK， 我相信大部分或者所有委員。
I believe all members have applied the chop. So voting is closed. The staff may not distribute ballot papers anymore. So please go and collect the ballot papers. Please drop your ballot paper into the ballot box by yourself, and please do not leave your seat before you have put the ballot paper into the box.
李卓人議員，你投咗票未㗎？
Mr. Lee Chuk-yan, have you voted? Okay. All right, Mr. Kwok Kai-ki and Mr. Wong Kwok-kin, please come out to supervise the vote counting. We have collected 48 ballot papers. We've distributed and collected 48 papers respectively. Thank you. Members, our staff members have been counting as they were collecting the papers.
係咪需要我喺度即刻點一點？即係而家即刻數，其實一陣間
我諗咧可以咁樣，我哋都橫掂都係要數票嘅嚇。我哋唔需要再逐張數啦。
There is no need for us to count the total number of ballot papers. We'll just do the counting now, and all ballot papers will be destroyed after the election.
數一次啦，數一次先。數一次。
對咗先嚇 ，OK， 逐張眼。OK。
郭家麒議員未出嚟喎。
喺度喺度。
喺後邊。
睇緊。企埋呢度啊，阿國。睇緊，我睇醫生，企埋呢度一齊。咪中途一陣間佢。
2號。
唔係，我讀啦。
Number 2.
2號show 咗。
Number 2. Number 1. Number 2. Number 1. Number 2. 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 Number 1. Number 1. Number 1. Number 2. Number 1. Number 1. Number 2. Number 1. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 1. Number 2. Number 1. 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 Number 2. 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 Number 2. Number 1. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2.
All
right, as you've seen, Secretary, please count the total number of ballot papers collected.
OK。經秘書再核實。
Once again verified by the Secretariat, I now announce the results. Number 1, Ms. Emily Lau received 21 votes. And number 2, Mr. Tam Yu-chung received 27 votes. I declare Mr. Tam Yu-chung elected chairman of the Constitutional Affairs Panel. Congratulations. So please chair the election of the deputy chairman.
我首先呢將會議延長。
I'll first extend the meeting by 15 minutes so that we can elect the deputy chairman. Nominations for the deputy chairman. Mrs. Regina Ip. I nominate Mr. Paul Z. Seconder, Priscilla Leung. Do you accept, Mr. Z? Any other nomination? Professor Kenneth Chen. I nominate Ms. Emily Lau. Any seconder? Ms. Ho seconds. Ms. Emily Lau, do you accept? All right. We will now hand out the ballot papers.
Yep. 跟住大家搞錯呢，1號。
Number 1 is Mr. Paul C. Number 2 is Ms. Emily Lau. To avoid confusion. Since this is a secret ballot, please do not show your completed ballot paper to another member. Have you all received a ballot paper? If so, please chop at the appropriate location. If you've all got a ballot paper and exercised your choice, I declare the voting closed. Secretariat may not distribute ballot papers anymore. Secretariat, please gather or collect the ballot papers. Please put your ballot paper into the box personally. Please, Mrs. Regina Ip and Professor Kenneth Chen, please come up to supervise the counting of votes. So, please help to transfer the ballot boxes, the votes.
係總共3個票箱，先點個總數。
Please count the total number of ballot papers. Secretary, we distributed 49 ballot papers and collected the same number. We now count the votes. Number 2, number 1,
number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, Number 2. Number 1. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 1. Number 1. Number 1. Number 2. Number 2. Number 1. Number 1. Number 1. Number 2. 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 Number 1. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Number 1. 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 Sorry, it's number 2. Sorry, it should be number 2. Number 2. Number 2. Altogether 49 votes. Number 1, Mr. Paul Tse, 27 votes. Number 2, Ms. Emily Lau, 22 votes. So number 1, Mr. Paul Tse, is elected Deputy Chairman. All right. Next item on the agenda, date of the next meeting. What's happening? Any accident? Please be seated. An announcement. Item 2 on the agenda, schedule of meetings. At the last meeting, the panel had its regular meetings on the third Monday of every month at 2:30 p.m. If there's no objection, we'll observe that arrangement. We've set out the meeting dates for this session. We started at 2:30 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. If necessary, we can have an extension. Item 3, items for discussion at the next meeting. The administration has proposed 2. First of all, district councillors and rural representatives who have not yet been imprisoned, as well as the number of electors registered. Mr. Lee Chayan, Mr. Chairman, I think we all know that constitutional reform is a very important issue. There's no reason for us not to call an urgent meeting to discuss that. And there are strong requests from the public to ask the NPCSC to withdraw its decision. And we need to call an urgent meeting tomorrow or day after tomorrow. It's so urgent that it should be convened immediately. We know that the latest development is that the Hong Kong Federation of Students and Mrs. Carrie Lam will have a meeting. There's no reason for this panel not to have any dialogue or discussion. So we should call an urgent meeting to discuss the latest development on constitutional reform and the NPCSC decision. I've heard you. I'll go back and study that. I'll discuss with the administration to see what arrangements can be made. Ms. Emily Lau? Mr. Chairman, I very much agree with Mr. Lee Chia-yan. The whole issue is an urgent matter in society. Is not in order that the LegCo is idling on this issue. I think the chairman and the deputy chairman should fairly and justly handle this matter. Views noted. If there's no further comments, meeting adjourned.